Are you feeling proud yet? I'm not feeling proud. I'm feeling grouchy and vicious and in exactly the right mood to be talking about the seven deadly sins. Get in here. Welcome to the Mosaic Ark. I'm sick of everybody. I'm tired of pretending to be like I'm the sweet and nice one. I'm not. Now she's quiet. Nobody's even going to talk to me today. My gosh.
I'm afraid to talk to you.
I woke up grouchy and knew we had to do wrath today. No, I don't even. It's like sloth, gluttony. I mean, sometimes don't you just wake up and feel like, what's the bloody point? Is that envy? Wait.
I'm not sure what deadly sin that is.
Who believes in sin anyway? This is Pride Month, right? No, we're not going to show you any of the photos that we've seen. It's supposed to be, it's glamorous and glorious, and you're supposed to walk around with your bum hanging out. Wait a minute, I am in such a bad mood.
Unicorns and rainbows and
that
is sheer abound.
I mean, I spent all weekend at graduation with people being proud, right? And then I was like, is that the same thing? Is it wrong to be proud of your accomplishments?
I've had this discussion. It's got to be something different, right? To take pride in oneself. It's like, yeah, for a Christian, it's almost a dirty word, but it doesn't mean the same thing as the sin. So what's a better word for that? When you have worked hard for your accomplishments and you're very happy about what you've achieved. What would you call that?
Well, I don't even know. I'm too crabby to even figure this out. I'm not completely acting. I am feeling kind of crabby. So what you just said was actually one thing I was thinking about. It's like we've been talking about pagan and Christian, and of course everybody, when they default to Christian, is usually talking about being nice, right? It's like Christian is being nice, which is of course why we can't ever say anything about anybody being proud of stuff, because how dare you be proud? You have to be not. Wait, is that the same thing?
No, it's not the same thing.
Proud and nice.
No, you're supposed to be proud of your accomplishments and.
Well, I'm not.
But yes, you're supposed to be a good person.
But
right?
What's
but
good?
Then good is not defined. Exactly. You haven't killed anybody. It's like, well, that's restraint. Right? But it doesn't encompass all of good. So what does that mean? What does it mean in a pagan society? What does good mean?
Well, funny that you ask. Okay, I am actually trying to like order my thoughts here so that it's not all chaotic and horrible, which is of course the place where you are when you are pissed off and prideful and in sin. And if I pull myself out of this, I'll lose this whole mood.
I'm torn now. Should I tell you to stay angry? Then I'm being sinful.
Is it amusing?
But it makes for a good
does it
show.
amuse? Are we not entertained? Entertained.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have now established in the space of about 3 minutes the complexity of the problem that we're going to be trying to deal with tonight. Inspired by, maybe I'll pull out and do professory stuff for a second. Okay, inspired by the fact that this month we're supposed to be thinking about pride, which is ironic and frustrating and complicated for people because, of course, it's designed to be pride in a particular activity, which, in scriptural terms, is definitely sinful. Which I think is one layer. There's what you said. What would.
And in social terms, is just vulgar. I mean, how many people go around talk? I mean, comedians make jokes about this. How many people go around talking about their sexual inclinations in public, or have parades for it? You don't, because it's silly, right? But I think I just called it silly. You know, this is they're people doing this are trying to turn the world upside down using the magic of the English language. Must be a more precise language to use to discuss the difference between pride and happiness at accomplishment, and
yes, I see what you're asking.
And what isn't appropriate to speak about in public, and the free speech, capital, free speech capital of the world. At least it used to be, right?
Okay, let me count what the things that I've heard us say thus far.
It's a lot.
Well, yeah, what we have, what is it to be Christian? What is it to be, what is it to be, sort of, what you were saying, proud in your accomplishments versus proud in, I think there's something else there. What it is to be virtuous in a pagan sense. I've got tucked in all of this in my thinking what the problem of morality is. And lurking beneath all of this, you guys, because we're promising, it's what is actually sin, right? And it is interesting that I think, let me just start back up at the top of what I was thinking is, most of the time when we start talking about stuff, it's like Christian morality, right? There'll be these two things. It's like, Christian nationalism, Christian morality. And the whole problem with talking about what's this month about is, oh, well, you can't impose your morality on us as Christians. And then you sort of, well, if you look in in the 10 Commandments, there isn't a thing for being proud. There's no, thou shalt not be proud. So it seems that we have some work to do here. Skype does not want us talking about this. Why is it so difficult? Why this is, let's like say, why? Hi, Silent Draco. Mel, judgy. Yes. Well, the thing is, we're going to be judgy tonight, but we have to figure out what we're actually judging, which is part of the problem. And I think so. I started off, is it sinful for me to be grumpy because I'm not being nice, right? Or is it virtuous for me to be angry, or is it moral for me to, wow, Casey's stream it, you blanked out twice now.
I did.
Good grief.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so the demons do not want us having this conversation, because we're going to clarify all of this, we hope. Is it moral to be, I mean, all of these things, there's a real like category issue embedded in even getting to the point where we're able to talk about what's up.
Can I propose a definition just off the top of my head what pride is?
Okay.
Self-worship, and all the other deadly sins are in service to it.
Oh, well, that was swift.
Now
that, just in case she gets cut out, she's already solved it. Yeah, that's actually, that's okay. So why is it so hard for people to get to understand that, to see it?
Well, because if you're not worshiping any God, you won't accept that you're self-worshiping, because it doesn't make any sense, right? It just means I'm just happy. I'm just doing what makes me happy, and I'm very proud. I'm proud of myself, and how is that wrong? And I've heard Well, it's made its way into the American lexicon. To be proud is not a bad thing. And recently, there have been people. Usually, I've seen this on Twitter. I think who are reminding Catholic priests and reminding people pride is a deadly sin. Right now, it's not just Catholic priests I've seen doing this. Lots of people have done this over the past couple of years. Yeah. People have forgotten that it is, because it's made its way in as not just benign or neutral, but desirable. Like there's something wrong with you if you're not proud of yourself. You should be proud of yourself. That's a common phrase. And if you're not, well, you obviously you need some help. You must be depressed. You're down on yourself. Why aren't you proud of yourself? But it's a different thing they're talking about. They're talking self-worship is different than I'm trying to come up with the definitions without using the word we're talking about. It's really difficult to do.
What, sin or vice?
Pride in your accomplishment.
Well, then there's self-confidence. Right? I mean, but the self is in there, right?
Yeah. Well, confidence is necessary for survival a lot of times. If you think of
self-assertiveness, I mean, the self is potentially situated in there.
Yeah, but I mean, so those things are necessary. Pride is more the elevation of the self to a godlike status that you have to then serve constantly.
This is okay. We need to help people get to that definition, because I don't think they're going to buy it yet, but I think you're right.
No. And Aquinas did say anger is a virtue. If you're not, depending on what you're angry at.
There's such a thing as righteous anger. Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Frankly, I'm not ready to go to Aquinas levels on this, although maybe we should eventually.
That's the one thing I know that he wrote. I have not read Aquinas.
Okay, so I did actually. Yeah. What I'm working off of is here. I did actually teach an entire graduate course on the virtues and vices, and we read Aquinas, and we had a Dominican help me read Aquinas, so I may be able to work us through on this one. But I was.
Well, isn't that interesting that they were thinking about the same things? We're still thinking about the same things as centuries earlier. How to define it.
Right, but I think yes. I'm trying to figure out how to introduce this bluntly, or not too bluntly. It's so funny, I'm feeling tongue-tied about it. Okay, nobody knows how to talk about sin anymore. That's actually straight up the problem, right? And if we start with saying things like, oh, if you don't accept my pride of whatever I am as my self-identity, as this performance that I'm in, you're not being nice, right? And so we're hamstrung on the nice, and there's this giant barrier between us and an ability to see what it is that Aquinas was talking about, or anybody else, or like Dante, or why in fact it might be a bad thing to celebrate certain kinds of activities that you get up into. Yeah, okay, we need to talk about Kant, I'm afraid. It's very briefly. So I did do, we last summer when we were doing the promotional for Drake Alchemicus, right? I put up a bunch of blog posts on fencing Barrett prayer, and I was talking about the different layers of meaning that we have in the poem, and how we were dealing with, among other things, a moral level of the problem, which is modeled directly on Fairy Queen, which is what we're using as our base sort of inspiration for writing Draco Alchemicus. And in our writing right now, guys, in thinking about Draco Alchemicus, we are reading the stanzas where Spencer is introducing all the 7 deadly sins, which, so therefore we figured we were being shown enough that we had to deal with all of this. But the problem is that nobody now believes in sin. And
correct.
Right? The talking about the 7 deadly sins is something that is pretty complicated to get people to, because they get hung up first on this question of what morality is. And I'm getting hung up there, so I'll just have to explain it. Thanks to Kant, whom I have not read in any detail except for on what is enlightenment, but I think I understand this sufficiently well to understand what the problem is. Kant defines morality as just not bugging other people. There you go. Right? It's
well, I don't think I would agree with
well,
that.
no, and but that's the problem. So I have this in the blog post that I wrote on the moral layer, right? It's the moral layer. By the time Kant came along in the late 18th century, morality had nothing to do with sin, which is why there's two different categories, right? It's like, don't impose your morality on me. What on earth does that mean, right? If we start with this, like, we're being bothered by the people doing the parades or something like that. And, I've seen on Telegram now, parents being disturbed that naked people are wandering around in front of their children going, how is this, like in Oregon, how is this at all appropriate, right? Yeah. And it seems to require, and I've been sort of puzzling over this because there's a lot of like Freud and Jung and everything in there, but let me see. Oh, yes, it's all in this paragraph. Okay, so by the time Kant came along in the late 18th century, morality had nothing to do with sin and everything to do with perspective. Your morality may not be my morality, although my morality should not interfere with yours, which seems to be basically what people go with right now, right? It's like, there's a fancy Kantian word for it, but it's that as long as what I'm doing is not interfering with you in any way, I can't say that what you're doing has any relevance to what I'm doing. I mean, like that we're in this morass of not even being able to talk about why it's a problem for grown adults to be walking around naked on the streets right now in front of two-year-olds.
Right, and if you think you have a problem with that, well, you're wrong. Oh, that was easy.
Right, and that's kind of where we're stuck. We're completely stuck. And add a little John Stuart Mill, and hey presto, morality has become the pressure of the masses on the eccentrics who just want to do experiments in how to live. And Mill includes like, try polygamy, you'll like it, right? So we've got the Kantian.
I do agree with that.
The Kantian, as long as you're not interfering with me, what I do and what you do have no relevance to each other. You have Mill saying, well, it's any kind of restriction on my eccentricity is the masses trying to impose their mores, like their social morality on me, which could be wrong because I'm a genius and I might be learning, new solutions to different kinds of things that if I am not allowed to express them. And what Mill wanted to do was have the affair that he was having with Harriet.
That's convenient.
Yeah, no, and he was in love with Harriet Taylor for all these years, and then her husband finally died, and then they get married, and then Harriet died, and then he wrote on Liberty, right? To say that it was all her ideas, right, which was basically why can't we have sex with the people that we want to? It's just the masses, and their bourgeois morality stifling us, right? Okay, so Kant plus Mill.
So it's an intellectual temper tantrum through.
Mm-hmm. We're not there yet. We're not yet to why naked people are wandering on the streets in front of toddlers. Cue Freud, and sin becomes something you can blame on your mother. Or, as I was just reading, Freud wanted to have a incestuous affair with his sister, so he invents the Oedipus, his sister-in-law, so he invents the Oedipus complex to describe his desire as what everybody wants. Something like that.
What?
Yeah, so the Oedipus complex is Oedipus wants to, kill his father and sleep with his mother or his sister. Right. Apparently, there's an escape clause in it, and that Freud actually wanted to have an affair with Bernays, his sister-in-law. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. They're making up reasons. I don't know what Kant's sexual immorality was.
Here. It's like, well, you think that's bad? That's normal. At least I don't want to sleep with my mother.
Well, no, it's normal because everybody wants to do it, and you're just repressing. Yeah, you're repressing. The repressing of these. Are you okay?
Oh. Yeah, I'm describing. I said, "Wow!"
Oh, wow. It's like it's hard.
While scratching my neck. Sorry, they're not related.
We're still not done, right? Because I'm pretty sure
I have to put a lot of makeup on to look human with all these lights on me.
What are you blinding yourself with your vanity? How wait, we'll get there, right?
I'm thinking of the people watching, really.
No, it's your vanity. It's your vanity.
Without makeup.
Q. Okay, so we've got Kant, Mill, Jung, Freud, Q. Jung, and it is the stuff of psychedelic dreams that point you to the secrets of the archetypes. Probably, it's hard to tell with Jung. That's true, right? So if you're having these sort of 60s. Weird, mixed up desires, Jung, of course, does magical rituals with himself as a lion-headed god. So I don't even know if your mileage may vary it. It's just going to go straight off the cliff with that. Was he a big fan of mushrooms by any chance? I don't know, but he was definitely a fan of the esoteric. So
yeah,
we're finding a pattern here of the people who have the high eccentrics who have defined our morality that says pride is appropriate. Bring in the advertisers, and this we're definitely going to do that, right? Bring in the advertisers, and before you can say knife, I don't even know where that phrase comes from anyway, but it's quick, right? Everyone is encouraged to embrace his or her sin as healthy, because after all, you wouldn't want those desires repressed. For that, we can thank Freud's nephew, Bernays. Yeah. Right. So, what? Sounds getting the distinct whiff of sulfur from the philosophers. Oh, yeah, you're right. The philosophers. That's what Silent Draco is. They get a Fatman said they get a Pride Month. Do we get an Envy Month? No, it's so unfair. Well, we're gonna own. No, actually, we don't want to own these vices. We want to figure out what happens is we get an Anger Month, and they're not going to be happy about it when that happens because too many people are being hurt by their self-expression. Wait a minute. Kant said that as long no, I refuse to believe that anybody's being hurt by their behavior in public. No. I mean, next you're going to be telling me that X having porn is not a bad thing. I have noticed a lot more that videos keep coming up in my feed, that are like that. I'm like, when did this start? And it was right after the announcement. I remember you said that even before the announcement. You said, why am I getting all this stuff? So I saw an exchange between you and Milo on Twitter. And I'm like, I haven't gotten any. And a couple of days later, sure enough. I started getting stuff immediately. Milo got back on. And I was I searched Milo and suddenly, oh my gosh, don't want to see those videos. And apparently though, you can see those things on the street right now. And then there was something else. Oh, that I clicked on the show further replies, some may be offensive. And none of them had been offensive until I did that on, I think the porn follows the bigger accounts. And it follows, and it follows certain search terms. So, I mean, E. Michael Jones has talked about that a lot, saying that there's certain there's certain things that are set up so that if you search on them, you end up with a bunch of porn, so that it's like more of the advertising, social engineering to get you into those sorts of things. Yeah. So ironically, other things that I've been searching on had never pulled stuff up, but searched on Milo and whammo. Yeah, naked people. I hadn't even searching on anything. I hadn't even searched anything, and it just started appearing after the announcement. So I just think maybe a whole lot of people flooded on and went, cool, we can advertise on here now, and just started flooding everybody's feed with it. Well, the bots, I certainly see all the girl bots, right? Nudes in bio, right? But surely this is, Kantian morality would suggest that none of this should have any effect on not hurting you. Right. And if anybody ever wants to do a study on the effects of porn on the brain, well, we'll just say that's hateful, and we won't allow it to be published. But why is it hateful? Right? Okay, so I think we have finally, like half an hour in, we'll hit our stride soon, right? These are the category problems, right? It's like the morality has been defined as something that's private. And as long as it's not actively hurting someone else, like by punching them or, I don't know. Yeah, physical assault. The thing is that pornography actually assaults the brain. It's like a drug hit. And that's what they're hoping. They're hoping that some young kid sees a glimpse of it and they're going to want to see more immediately because it excites the dopamine section of the brain.
I mean, there have been studies on that, but
wait a minute.
Yeah,
so you're so
it's
okay. See,
hurtful.
this is why I get it, right? You Christians just don't want anybody to have fun.
Yeah, we just want to be fun. Yeah, we're just sticks in the mud.
But that's it, right? It's like what's wrong with getting dopamine hits? I mean, that sounds pleasurable, right? Isn't it supposed to be pleasurable?
Right.
All the dopamine hits. So
that?
Christian morality. Christian morality. One, it's not hurting you, so why? Just don't look. And two,
don't look and don't go to the beach and don't go walk down the street. I had to flee the beach at age 11 in San Francisco because of this crap. Oh my gosh! Some guy disrobed right in front of me and my 6-year-old sister, and I had to grab her hand and say, "We're going. Let's go. We're leaving right now."
Okay, and, you're nearly as ancient as I am, which means that was a while ago.
That was 1979.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yep. And nudity was common on that beach. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, well, I just think you're not embracing your inner princess properly.
What kind of princess would I be?
Disney.
If I was okay with that kind of stuff.
I've got a montage of Disney princesses here demonstrating that the problem with this entire conversation we're having right now is that we are not, we just don't want people to be glamorous and sexy and desirable and that, right? This whole thing, this whole claim that we're worried about Pride Month is just because we don't get enough sex. Wait.
It's also skeevy.
I know, but it's been really hard for people to fight this, right? To fight this claim that has come out of the
because they want to be nice.
Kant plus Mill plus Freud plus Jung plus Bernays. That it's inappropriate to that we've gotten to the point where it's inappropriate to even talk about sin because there is no such thing, and in fact it's just me trying to oppress you in your behavior when you just want to express your self-identity, something like that.
So Freud, I think, is pretty famous for saying that psychoanalysis with his experiences with psychoanalysis was that the people who needed the least amount of help or were the least oppressed were Catholics because they had confession.
You're giving away the punchline.
Sorry.
Okay, no, she's right.
Let's just footnote.
Casey is so hard to corrupt. She's like rock solid. Pride is self-worship. You're gonna get to that, and we'll understand that. And two, confession is actually better than psychoanalysis, and we're gonna explain why by the end of this episode, or at least no, that's fine. Because I like try to be too mysterious, and everybody falls asleep and tells me that I should make shorter videos. Too bad. I'm not making short videos. You slothful landlubber. What I don't know. I'm not on my best form tonight. It's so funny. It's so funny.
That's because I know for a fact that Rachel has handcuffed herself to make this about the deadly sins and not about Pride Month. So we're really restraining ourselves to hone down the topic here just to the 7 deadly sins. It will creep in because it has to, because that's the result of self-worship, is all these things around us right now.
Well, okay, so what I actually saw today was a bunch of kids in summer camp playing with the big rainbow parachute thing, and I was like, "Is this okay? I don't know." For me, this is
stolen the rainbow. We've got
to get that rainbow back. I spent all of my childhood, with sets of colors. Right, rainbow is your crayons, and you're coloring everything in rainbows. I loved rainbows, so we need to get this rainbow back.
It's just so telling how they corrupted that, because it's something children love. This is also why they corrupted Disney, which is why your example is perfect. The Disney princesses.
Well, okay, so I have a kind of sketch here of a plan of a it's like, how is it that it's so hard for us to talk through the problem with the pride properly, and then what we hope to do from this episode, and get more fluent subsequent episodes once I've established that I'm right, is talk through like antidotes to all of these different sins, because we're going to show you that you're really affected by all of them and you don't want to be. However, there is this huge stumbling block that it's once you get to people to the point where you, okay, we need, why am I having this problem? Are the 7 deadly sins that these princesses are showing actually in the Bible?
Well, examples of them are in the Bible. I can think of them.
Right, but is the list in the Bible?
I don't think it is.
No,
yeah.
And I think that's.
I'm thinking because it's in the Catechism is what I'm thinking of,
yes.
Which is always tied to the Bible in different passages.
Yes. So this is kind of ironic that we have this system of thinking about whatever it is, this thing, and it's not actually a list of things that shows up in the scriptures. So I think one of the things I've been thinking about this, and I've been thinking about this in context with our pagan America conversation. It's like we showed what happened when we were talking to John Davidson with it, there's only 2 choices: Christianity and paganism, right? And the pride, the self-worship is on the paganism side. But one of the real challenges and the strangeness of the problem for Christians is I don't think Christians are typically terribly good about explaining what it means to be Christian. Including in this, yeah. I don't. Including, but more specifically in this context of morality, so that it's like Christian morality. There's since Kant, there's always been this exercise to say, no, morality doesn't need to be Christian. You don't need to be Christian in order to be moral.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, I have heard that directly from people.
Constantly. And so, like early on in our conversation right now, you're saying, what does it mean to be virtuous as a pagan? And it's like, well, strong actually just means virtue means strength, right? So, but there are other ways, right? We could talk about that, but I think one of the huge difficulties and one of the barriers is like, and maybe I do actually want to talk about Pride Month, and I'm just blotting it badly because it's.
Well, you have to mention it a bit.
Well, no, because it's the huge stumbling. It's like it's what has made it impossible for the churches to know whether or not it's appropriate to say, we welcome everyone, but you shouldn't be doing that.
Right. So what is the opposite? So what's the opposite of pride? What's the virtue? Corresponding virtue that contrasts with pride?
Well, humility.
Is it humility?
It's humility, yeah.
Right. Okay, so I think the pride movement has done a very good job of tying in humility and quietness and being, quote, in the closet, right, with being suicidal. And if anybody questions it, it's, you want me to die. You want gay people to die, which is absurd. Nobody wants to die. It's awful.
Right.
But I think that's why the churches it wasn't just infiltration. I think they got hamstrung because they wanted to, and this was abused too. They wanted to, and exploited by other people, to express God's mercy to them, right? But it kind of stopped there with, well, let's just be nice and let's not talk about sin because, well, as you're pointing out, people couldn't really understand it because if they weren't raised in a Christian home or a Christian culture, it was rapidly de-Christianizing over the 20th century, the latter half of the 20th century.
Right.
How do you talk to people, right? So their inability to talk to people meant that the pride got puffed up more and more and more, and it took over the streets in the week and the month.
Right.
And in some places, it took over the whole school system in California now.
Well, in our entire governmental situation, right?
It's like it's going out in the State Department. They're flying, rainbow flags. It's disastrous for us. And in the eyes of other countries who are right about this, we are wrong. We should not be promoting this, right?
But
it's not just because.
But there's no robust way of explaining it, so that people
snowball.
Right, but it's I'm wanting tonight to wrestle through this in my grumpiness,
Okay.
to the point where people can see why it's like the why. What's the sort of why? What's the why?
The why of what?
Well, it's what sin is, right? And I find that's actually
Right.
the thing that people have the most difficulty just understanding, because the feeling of, well, isn't it sinful to exclude me from your party? Isn't that mean?
Yeah.
Right? If you won't let me come
Right.
to your
Why do you want to,
your party, so it's a
why do you want to
social
come to my party?
a social exclusion. Well, no,
Yeah, but it's a lie.
right, but it's the, you know, we want everybody to be included and to be having fun and not to be felt like they don't belong. And
Yeah. Well, they do belong, but you know, not under. They belong, but not under their own. What's the word I'm looking for? Oh, their own demands.
okay,
They can't come into the party and change the party.
But okay, but I think let's back up a little bit and say, okay, so we got these Disney princesses, right? These seven deadly Disney princesses, and I mean, I can't remember when I saw this. I've had these pictures for a long time. It's a campaign, I think, from like 2011 or something like that, and it's funny because they're meant to be showing them as appealing, although they don't all look completely nice, right? It's like we got vanity.
No, they're the looks of
beauty
their
is vanity,
ugh.
and there's Wrath, who's from Aladdin, maybe, I don't know, and
yeah, I think it's Aladdin.
The one from The Little Mermaid is Envy,
Greed.
Greed.
Oh,
Greed. Yeah.
I thought she was Greed.
Which one's? Oh no,
Yeah,
Tinkerbell is
she
envy.
collected all the
Actually,
things.
Tinkerbell is envious of Wendy.
Tinkerbell
Yeah.
was envious. That was very funny.
Gluttony is Snow White.
Yeah, that one I didn't get just because of the apple.
I guess. I mean, they're reaching. So it's like there's the list of seven, which is, you know, I think what the point of this is most people find the list funny, right? It's like
Yeah, what is it from?
The list? Oh, well, I can tell you.
No, that camp. Was that a real campaign?
Oh no, it's not.
It's
somebody else's drawing, so that they're. It's not actually Disney. They're redrawn the Disney characters.
Right.
Oh,
yeah,
Cinderella's Lust,
kind of scary
right?
And angry.
And Tinkerbell, and then that means I can't recognize any of these characters. This is hilarious.
Well, you got Princess Jasmine. You got
Jasmine is Wrath. Okay, Jasmine's Wrath.
Beauty and the Beast. That was I forget her name.
But I mean, Belle. Yeah, because she's Beauty, right? So I think the general premise here is it's sort of whimsical and naughty, and doesn't actually everyone want to be just a little bit naughty and mischievous, and that sin is something therefore comical and not threatening.
Right. They're diminishing the importance of it. Yeah. Why it matters. I'm not sure that would be effective. That's why I asked you where it came from.
What the Disney thing?
Yes.
I don't remember. But it's typical of the way in which the list of these vices is usually, performed in our culture. So much so that I do remember when I saw this one, that you can make the sort of jokes about how aren't all of these sins actually good things, right? So I paired our princesses with this was from, I think these were ads that were made 1987. It's a pretty long time ago. That the idea was show how, in fact, all of the seven deadly sins are actually desirable things, right? So we're going to have them all be so pride
Perfect for
is the
ladies,
one
yeah.
that's right up there at the top, right? It's time to start feeling really good about yourself, really good. Pride goeth before a fall. We've all heard it, but how true is it? It's mostly bunk, agreed today's top mental health experts, right? Which is getting where we were going to, right? It's saying pride is being
Yeah.
identified with pride, the sin you can feel good about. You've all heard the bad mouthing. You've heard all the bad mouthing at home, in Sunday school, in literary magazine. Pride's a sin, they proclaim. Well, don't you believe it? Pride's gotten a bad rap, says psychiatrist ornithologist Bernard Warbler. That's a silly joke. It's time this
Yeah,
country
get
wakes up
it.
and faces facts. Pride, to whatever extent, is healthy and natural. The psychiatric community is in complete agreement on this point. So stick out your chest, for heaven's sake. Pride, it's today's buzzword for mental health. Henry VIII, failure after romantic failure. It was Henry's pride that kept him searching for Mrs. Right. At 52, he finally found her, the lovely Catherine Parr. William Plover, dictionary editor. The most misunderstood word in the English language, hubris or excessive pride, is a word that's quickly leaving our vocabulary. Good riddance. The concept of excessive pride no longer works, and people are taking notice. Okay, there's a poet celebrates pride. This is quoting from Ozymandias, right? And on the pedestal these words appear. Look up, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. This is funny. Shelley was this Percy Bysshe Shelley. Shelley was an early advocate of prideful living. His famous king Ozymandias wasn't afraid to put his words or himself up on the pedestal. Shelley's wife, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, believed pride enabled men to do the extraordinary. Her novel Frankenstein was a classic celebration of a doctor's pride so great it was larger than life itself. Dr. Frankenstein, it's like they were having a hard time when they did these of not actually showing that they're sins, but anyway. Dr. Frankenstein's pride allowed him to create a human being, a task no fictional character had ever before accomplished. Oh, that's not true, but anyway. Putting yourself on a pedestal, it's never been more convenient. But how can you live more pridefully? It's easier than you think. We're the Pride Council, a trade association dedicated to bringing fine products to the American people at prices that make pride easy to swallow. And then it was a coupon. The Pride Council, 666 Broadway. 666 Broadway, New York, New York.
Yeah.
You've got me convinced. Rush me free information on the following prideful products and companies, please. Your Face in Bronze, Inc., Old World Family Crests, Roots to Royalty Ancestor Investigators, the Freelance Biographers Guild, Acme Pedestal Company. Don't dally. Send in your coupon today. It would be a sin not to. Okay, so...
It was very well written, whoever did that.
What's funny is that this was like, what, 1987, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I think I didn't realize that these were that old. I remembered seeing them in Harper's back in the day. Was I reading Harper's back in 1987? Yeah. And therefore, in the midst of when Pride, the parades and stuff were already a thing or had already been happening, and it's I feel like we've been, the conflictedness about, but how can it be bad to have self-confidence, right? Which is where we started with.
Well, when you start waving in the face of children in public, it's not a good thing. And they'd say, well, why not?
Well, right? Then that's just, is that nudity? Too. Is that, okay, so that's pride. Here we go. Now we go on to the next one, which is envy. What luck! All the other agencies got the plumb deadly sins: lust, wrath, avarice, pride, gluttony. I think these were actually real ad agencies. I'm not sure when they did them. Those lucky slobs get the sins you can really sink your teeth into. Why, they practically sell themselves. Hell, whoever got sloth probably didn't even have to do an ad. Boy, what do we get stuck with? Envy. Boy, talk about deadly. I always thought that one was the lamest. Like, they didn't really believe that. I mean, because like, how much of actual advertising is in fact all about envy?
Well, yeah, pretty much all of it, right? Got to keep up with the Joneses,
right? So it's like the funniness about this campaign. One, Bernays actually, designed advertising to feed into all of our desires, not just dopamine, but all of the other stuff, and that all of the keeping up with the Joneses stuff is actually so envy. It feels to me like they couldn't make envy. They couldn't twist envy into an ad in quite as well as pride could. Pride was just like, it's all of those self-help ads.
Well, I don't know. The envy one was well, I thought it was written pretty well. It was kind of an ironic.
Well, it's clever.
Satire,
yeah.
right?
Well, but so you're not sure, right? Because here we have wrath, the only emotion powerful enough both to start a war and stop one. Which all of our protesters in the encampments over the last few weeks would agree with, right? There's Hitler being angry, starting wars, right? And then there's the protesters yelling at the Nazis, or I don't know where they're. I think, it says Vietnam. It's a Vietnam poster in the background. So so that if we can get angry at the pigs, that's good.
Stop the rag. Yes, and it only took them like 12, 13 years. Not successful. All their protests.
Oh, of stopping the Vietnam War. Well, but this is, I mean, this sense of, this is why all the SJWs and the Hamas protesters and everybody, they don't feel like they're doing anything wrong at all in the way in which they are occupying the campuses or expressing their fury at Israel.
Well, they succeeded in expressing their fury, but they didn't succeed in doing much else.
Okay, see, you're just unshakable. It's really frustrating. Stop being so virtuous. Get inside this problem here.
I'm trying. It's not virtue. It's just kind of obvious.
But what we're trying to wrestle with is why it's so hard for anybody to believe that there is such a thing as sin.
Oh yeah. No, it's all back to self-worship. This is why the protesters don't think they're doing anything wrong. Not only do they not think they're doing anything wrong in blocking traffic and blocking ambulances, but they think they're virtuous in doing so. And hey, if people die because they couldn't get to the hospital, well, that's just collateral damage, right? And their war against another war who are killing massive amounts of people in collateral damage. So it's strange to me how they can't see it. How they can't see what they're doing is wrong. And we're just using them as one example because you just brought them up. Yeah, but why are people blind to it?
My somewhat whimsical summary of Kant, Mill, Freud, Jung, Bernays, I skipped the Protestants, so we won't worry about them right now. But we've gotten to a place in modernity where between Kantian philosophy, Millian political liberty, Jungian, Freudian psychology, Jungian mythology, and advertising means I do think, people have gotten the idea finally. I mean, addiction is pretty much the only thing that people recognize as here we got if the original sin had been sloth, we'd still be in paradise.
That was pretty
animals. It's hard. It's like, if they hadn't had any ambition for, knowledge of good and evil, we wouldn't have ended up anywhere. We'd still be naked with the animals.
Well, yeah, I mean, the serpent he was the first advertiser, wasn't he? Yeah, I've got something you need. Oh, God says I should. Did he really say that though? Right? Did he say you couldn't eat anything? Really? Get them questioning themselves, questioning their worldview, right? And then taking that bite. Tell a friend. Right? And then she did. She told Adam.
See, you're just not going to make it. This is why we're struggling with getting people to buy our books. We're no good at the advertising because we know there's something diabolical in the exercise.
Well, yeah, we don't want to be devious about it. Exactly.
We're just virtuously trying to get you to think about all of these problems and not selling you pleasure or comfort or ease or dopamine hits or.
Yeah. Although that artwork is pretty sweet, I gotta say.
Well, I don't think this was theirs. This is a famous painting.
No. Ours.
Oh, yes. So we have beautiful artwork. It'll
Yes,
aesthetic, but the sort of thorn of trying to get you to pay attention to your eternal soul, which people also have a hard time believing in. Like we say, we have, okay.
I think people are just afraid to think of that.
Of the
I don't
soul?
think I don't think they have a hard time believing it at all. I think they're avoiding looking at it because it's scary, especially if they're not used to thinking about it.
Well, probably because we've got corrupted Santa Claus here. So we got the world's foremost authority speaks out on the subject of greed. Do you remember all of the things you told me you wanted as a child? Well, your list may have changed, but I'll bet it hasn't gotten any shorter. Perhaps you should be worried about that. Greed has always motivated men and women. I think this was actually before the greed speech in the Wall Street movie.
Oh yeah, greed is good. Yeah.
It has motivated inventors to make better mousetraps, artists to create greater art, and scientists to find cures for diseases and pathways to the moon. I'm not sure all of those were greed, but anyway. Just be sure to use your greed to good ends. Be greedy for knowledge. Be greedy for the kind of success that helps you, your family, and your friends. Be greedy for love. Just don't be greedy in ways that hurt others. It's so funny how some of these ads don't really work, right? Remember, I'll always be the first one to know if you've been bad or good. So be good for goodness sake. Okay, this one is less effective as a parody.
Yeah.
But it sets up again. It sets up that problem. It's like, shouldn't you? Isn't desire good? Isn't the
rightly ordered desire.
Oh, stop. No, we're not answering the. We're trying to get people into the.
No,
I'm having this conversation about sin and vice with someone who's like gone to confession recently. Clearly,
well,
you're too strong. You're holding out against me.
It's a very strange concept for people. If they've never thought about this before, it's like, well, shouldn't you follow your conscience? And I remember asking a priest this decades ago. He says, yes, you're rightly ordered conscience. I said, what's that? I mean, seriously, I had no idea what he was talking about. That was a foreign concept to me. And I had to think about it for a while before I got it, right? And it comes right down to, yes, we're Christians. We follow God. That's why. And somebody says, well, I'm not a Christian. I don't have to follow that. So convince me. Why should I? Nobody ever says that. But let's pretend they did. So as St. Paul said, you always have to have a reason, for the faith that is in you. Because he talked to people a lot. He was very educated. He was the apostle. He was the apostle that went to Greece and was trying to talk to people that invented arguing, right? and invented debate. So he was comfortable with the concept. Most of us aren't. We're not comfortable with confrontation. We're not comfortable with defense. We don't like defending our beliefs because maybe we're not articulate, right? Maybe it's just something we feel or something we know, or maybe this faith was a gift. To some people it is. It's not something they reached through contemplation or reading. It was just a gift. But it's very hard for us to explain it. So I think what happens is we end up trying to explain it on their terms, on purely secular humanist terms, and it can't be done because why shouldn't you do something that's fun?
Right. Yes.
Right?
Yes. Very well said. That we're getting there.
Okay.
No, this is really good because we don't have we generally as Christians are hamstrung by this one, you should be nice problem. Two, by this Kantian morality, you're not interfering with other people, which is philosophically bankrupt, but it's persuasive as the Enlightenment has been. And what you were just saying, there's the confusion of, you were saying it, and I lost how to express it.
Well, basically, let's take the United States. Just
clearly, Vice makes you inarticulate, just like I am tonight. She's much better off than I am.
We live in mission territory. That's what it is.
Oh yes, generally. Yes.
Generally in the United States, this is mission territory.
Yes.
It's a ripe mission territory. People take for granted, and others have written about this. Somebody very recently, but I can't remember who was, a British author, I think, that we've inherited this Christian society and this Christian morals, and we've just taken it for granted for a long time.
Yes.
actually, it might have been Dawkins that was writing about this. He's not a Christian, but he said his basic point was, I'm glad I live in a Christian society, even though I'm not a Christian, because these are good things that we've inherited from them, this morality we've inherited, and it's going away, and we're all suffering for it now. So it's kind of interesting that an atheist pointed this out, because at least superficially, it looks like he doesn't have anything to gain by saying this. Doesn't have any Christian street cred to gain by saying this,
right?
Which is what a lot of Christians get accused of.
Well, I see, again, this sort of, I'm like, I hope I can like pull myself out of this inarticulateness, because I'm thinking through layers of the problem. Saying this is a Christian society is different from worrying about these sins, which is complicated, I think. And the niceness is part of the social problem. And whether we can live in a Christian society with Christian morality, Christian society and Christian morality are not exactly the same thing. And okay, now we've got the be all you can be, the glutton society, helping people make the most of themselves for over 100 years. Now with this one,
that's a funny one. That's a perfect picture.
If this is in fact from the 80s, if I remember that correctly, or even that 1987 was actually real for the time.
Yeah.
This one's different. The greed one, it seems like to me we're all kind of different, because the different category of why these things are sinful, it seems to be different. Like the Santa Claus saying, "Oh, greed is good because it makes you, be greedy for goodness sake," right? Be greedy for good. What?
Yeah.
The gluttony one, this is making this very fat man plunging into the pool be comical. And the be all you can be is like, I think it was that another campaign.
That was the Army.
Oh, okay.
Army's campaign.
Yeah.
Recruitment campaign.
Okay. So, that there's this, the all is the hugeness of his physical self.
Right.
The humor in this one is different from the one with the Santa Claus. Or we have the last one. Any sin that's enabled us to survive centuries of war, death, pestilence, and famine can't be called deadly. Lust. Where would we be without it? And then we're back to the one that people are usually claiming to be talking about when we do Pride Month, which is actually, you should be able to do sexually whatever you want, quote, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, which is back with the Kantian Millian modernity sleight of hand.
Or did the AIDS epidemic not happen? As long as it doesn't hurt anybody, right?
Well, they had sexually transmitted diseases since we have history, right? So I think that's...
Oh, yes. Yes, they did.
Yes.
Right, so it definitely immediately physically hurts people. And it, yeah.
But indeed, without, sex, there's no people. Although pride sex that people are, marching for right now tends to be not the kind that makes people. Right?
It has nothing. Yeah.
So it's not really lust as a.
Yeah. It's not. Yeah. It's anti-fertility. It's the promotion of sterile sex.
I think, okay, we definitely have a category problem, which is since Kant's categorical imperative, whatever that was, I don't remember, is at issue here.
I haven't read them.
And neither have I. If I have to read him, it'll only be to find out how much we're like enfogged by Kant and his bad philosophy, which, makes it so that things that allegedly don't have it means you have no society, because there's no way that you can claim that my behavior affects your behavior.
That seemed to be a common thought. I got in a discussion with some people on Twitter about this Baphomet statue somebody tried to put up at Christmas, and I said, look, they're correct. They're free to put it up, but the fact that they chose Christmas to do it to detract from the Christmas decorations that were up, that was a provocation. And because it was a provocation, does that mean, they were actually trying to detract away from somebody else's free speech? And I think the answer to that is yes. They didn't agree with me, And they said, well, it doesn't affect you, right? It was the same thing. A naked man waving his penis in front of little children doesn't affect them, right? It said, well, it does affect them. It affects them psychologically. Well, that's their problem. It's like, well, no, that's our problem. That's the problem with free expression and free speech. It has to have limits. It has to have agreed upon limits so that we're not, trying to take other people's rights away, like the right to be able to walk down the street unmolested, including molestation of your eyes and brain.
We need to refine this a little bit so that some of these things make sense. Shall we do it now so I can stop being clumsily around?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Go for it.
Boys and girls. I realized like that was the opening hour. Now the second hour hopefully can be a little crisper. I think what I've realized in our talking this through purposefully, confusedly, is when we talk about Christianity and morality and sin, we're conflating several different systems. And the one that we're about to talk through with the 7 deadly sins isn't actually in the Bible in those terms. Which means I think, okay, and I've gone, wow, this is so interesting. It's very hard to stay clear tonight. The demons don't want me to tell you. I think one thing is we need to talk through the Sermon on the Mount, which is where most of the great social teaching comes from, that Jesus gives, and things like let your yes be yes and your no be no, and like don't lie, and the clarity of turning the other cheek and things like that. Most of those things don't fit neatly into whether or not you're sinning, right?
Right. It has to do with, I think, that particular example, that particular beatitude has to do with our response to people sinning around us.
Right.
Towards us. Right. And I think that's a good one to bring up, because I think that's where the cult of nice comes from amongst the Christian community.
Right.
You just have to turn the other cheek means you just have to take it.
You have to take all of it. Right.
Right.
So that's,
you definitely don't have to allow somebody next to you, especially children, they don't have to take it, and you have to stand up for them.
So our sense of where the sins come from it's not actually like, for example, in the Sermon on the Mount.
Right.
Neither is it, and therefore it's not like in the list of Beatitudes. I mean, there's blessed are the meek and blessed are that's another one of those problem ones. Blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are, again, not the 7 deadly sins.
Right. It's the opposite. It's what you should do. It's not what you should not do. Right. Thou shalt, be meek. Thou shalt, turn the other cheek.
But neither is what we're talking about with the 7 deadly sins in the 10 Commandments. Because the 10 Commandments are things like no other gods before me, no idols, keep the Sabbath holy, honor your father and mother, don't steal, don't bear false witness, don't commit adultery.
Don't covet. So that's envy and lust. Don't murder.
Don't kill.
That's anger.
Well,
but
those aren't actually quite exactly the same thing. Yeah. Because you can be.
They're related directly, though.
Yes.
Right.
But this is where people are able to get tangled up, I think, there are obviously direct prohibitions against men lying with men as women kind of things, like, thanks, Paul. So that's another thing. But the problem is the training that people had in virtue and vice throughout the ancient and medieval Christian tradition is not directly available in the scriptures in those terms.
So do you think that's the problem?
Well, I'm thinking that most of the time people don't have a particularly good understanding of what is being described with these vices. Like, because
they lack direct one-to-one examples?
because they are taken out of the context in which they were originally described as something that was problematic for people.
It's interesting that gluttony's in there. Most people didn't have access to large amounts of food.
Right, precisely.
Back then, but it was in there.
Wonder about that.
That is interesting.
Whose list is this? I can't answer this. Okay, it's monastic, right? And what's interesting about it is, so the list that we have of the 7 deadly sins, the specific list of 7 comes from Gregory the Great, but he's not actually the Pope, right? Writing in the 6th century, he's not actually the first one to come up with this list. The list that we have of the sins comes from the hermit Evagrius Ponticus, who's in the 4th century. And he's one of the great desert monks, and he's describing the ways in which the monks are themselves distracted in their prayer, right? The 7 deadly sins are in fact things that distract you from prayer. And the way Evagrius describes them, he's making a list of the 7 deadly. He doesn't call them sins; he calls them thoughts. They're deadly thoughts. They're the kinds of things that I say they draw you out. They distract you from prayer. And this was his list, right? Gluttony, impurity, lust, avarice, sadness, feeling sorry for yourself, anger or wrath, sloth, vainglory, and pride. And he actually has 2 different categories for vainglory and pride. And these are, in fact, all things that happen mainly just in your own head.
So what is it? What is vainglory?
How does he describe that? I've forgotten exactly how he puts that up. It's desiring for like fame in the world.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. And I want to look that up properly because I do have a better second. Okay, so this is here's the way Evagrius describes them. Gluttony, and he has 8 in the list, not just 7, right? Gluttony, or the concern that one is doing damage to one's body by pursuing the ascetic life. This gluttony for him is, in fact, I might hurt myself by fasting. Impurity or lusting after others' bodies. Yeah. Avarice, or the anxiety to care for one's old age, like piling up treasure so that you don't, particularly shame at the thought of accepting aid from others, which is interesting. Sadness, or feeling sorry for oneself in the denial of one's desires. Anger or wrath at the thought of those who have done one some injury. That's more like we would say peak at and wanting to get social revenge, right? Acedia, or distraction and sloth, along with the desire to abandon the ascetic life. Vainglory, or the desire to show off one's struggles and be commended by others. So like being seen. Right. And pride, or the conviction that one may be virtuous by one's own efforts without the help of God.
Oh, that's a very narrow definition, isn't it, of pride?
And this is what's interesting. And the list was, in fact, it's describing the distractions that you're prone to when you're living like a hermit in the desert and meant to be saying the Psalms all the time.
How could a hermit who lives alone, right?
Well, they're sort of in sets living alone, right?
Okay.
Like all these caves in Egypt. And there'll be and the noonday demon, the Acedia one, is one that has become famous recently because there's some books on it. And that one's the one where you're supposed to be in your cell praying the Psalms over and over and over again. Instead, you get up and wander around and go talk to the other hermits. It's like if you're like a student, you're supposed to be doing your homework, and you go off and bug all your classmates who are also supposed to be doing their homework. That's Acedia, right?
It's like
it's the distraction.
It's like the meme I saw said that I shared with you guys a couple of months ago. it was, whenever I want to clean my house top to bottom, I'll just say, I'm going to start writing my book today.
Yes, it's sort of like that. Yeah, it's these
Like
so in fact, this is high level training distractions that you're getting because you're not concentrating on your attention to God. So in this sense, it's like what we were saying about the sins. In this sense, we can have like social problems of failing love of neighbor, right? But these monastic sins are mainly failing in your ability to pay perfect attention to God.
Right.
So that
would be hard to do. That you would need to be a hermit to do that.
Well, that's the way they're living. And then we get so in the most famous list that we have, which is in this giant fat book by Gregory the Great. This is one volume of the 3 that is like that. Gregory is commenting on Job as a allegory of the Christian life, right? And it's the Old Testament book of Job. Job's being tempted by Satan to despair and give up his faith and everything. So it's all of these 7 deadly sins in this context are in the context of the ways in which you're attacked by the demons who want you to not be able to think clearly.
Like tonight.
Like tonight. Right? And in this context, and this is so the image that I'm showing now is one of the most famous of these, the battle of the night against the vices, and they're this storm of, monsters, demons and such, and they have extras, right? It's like they're not just 7 of them. They also have like attendants and such, and they just proliferate all of these different. And then I'd say sort of this is an interesting thing of exactly what are these failings of our soul. I mean, is it our intellect, our soul, our what's it? Like, what is it, right? Faults, sins. This is the way Gregory describes what they're like, right? For the tempting vices which fight against us in invisible contest in behalf of the pride which reigns over them. Some of them go first like captains, others follow after the manner of an army, right? It's the cicadas still haven't come out, right? it's more like they're the swarming of all of these irritants that are keeping you from being able to stay with your prayer. For all faults do not occupy the heart with equal access. But while the greater and the few surprise a neglected mind, the smaller and the numberless pour themselves upon it in a whole body. For when pride, the queen of sins, has fully possessed a conquered heart, she surrenders it immediately to 7 principal sins, as if to some of her generals to lay it waste. Okay, so now we get pride as, in fact, the leader of this army of sub-sins, and that you are, your heart is taken over by all of these distractions, right? And an army in truth follows these generals because doubtless there spring up from them importunate hosts of sins, which we set forth the better if we specially bring forth in enumeration as we are able the leaders themselves and their army. For pride is the root of all evil, of which it is said, as scriptures bears witness, pride is the beginning of all sin. It's Ecclesiasticus. But 7 principal vices as its first progeny spring doubtless from this poisonous root, namely vainglory, envy, anger, melancholy, avarice, gluttony, lust. For because he grieved that we were held captive by these 7 sins of pride, therefore our Redeemer came to the spiritual battle of our liberation, full of the spirit of 7-fold grace. But these several sins have each their army against us. For from vainglory there arise, this is a long list, but we're going to go through it. There arise disobedience, boasting, hypocrisy, contentions, obstinacies, discords, and the presumption of novelties. From envy there spring hatred, whispering, distraction, exultation at the misfortunes of a neighbor, and affliction at his prosperity. From anger are produced strife, swelling of mind, insults, clamor, indignation, blasphemies. From melancholy there arise malice, rancor, cowardice, despair, slothfulness in fulfilling the commands, and a wandering of the mind on unlawful objects. From avarice there spring treachery, fraud, deceit, perjury, restlessness, violence, and hardness of heart against compassion. From gluttony there are propagated foolish mirth, scurrility, uncleanness, babbling, dullness of sense and understanding. From lust are generated blindness of mind, inconsiderateness, inconstancy, precipitation, self-love, hatred of God, affection for this present world, but dread or despair of that which is to come. Because therefore 7 principal vices produce from themselves so great a multitude of vices, when they reach the heart, they bring, as it were, the bands of an army after them. But of these 7, 5, namely, are spiritual and 2 are carnal. And then he goes on to talk about how that they intersect with each other and such.
So pride is a cluster bomb, right?
Yes!
You drop it and hundreds of others open up and explode everywhere.
Yes. Right? And then, but notice what it's actually, so this is what's so ironic about what the trick that Freud and Jung have managed to pull on all of us is ancient medieval psychology is way more complex and has a much better understanding of the ways we are fragmented and like, what'd you say, this cluster bomb, right? It's like these sins just, they fracture us spiritually.
Yeah, I think the 20th century, from what I'm hearing from your readings, the new science of psychoanalysis and secular philosophy sounds like it was just trying to duplicate what was done by theologians and philosophers of the Middle Ages, and they had to I don't want to say dumb it down because I don't think they got it right. I think they had to simplify what they could understand of it and try to present it in a secular way. And I think the results have been disastrous when people replaced that for actual religious thought.
Well, I think so. I think something worse is that they've subverted it and confused it. I mean, I haven't read Kant because I'm not going to like wade through him. But you'd say that they've somehow, by way of, just like the ads are doing mischievously and satirically, somehow managed to get us not to be able to see the complexity of our own souls. I mean, we've literally been reduced to appetite.
That's it. Yeah.
And advertising.
The sexual appetite, food appetite. Yeah.
And that's not the way the monk, I mean, this is, like I said, this is this giant book, and this is part, the third part of the 3-part translation in 6 books, or however many, it's Gillian books, that Gregory's trying to work through what it means to be tempted. And this, that we are these, the soul is so incredibly complex and complicated, and literally we've reduced ourselves to dopamine. Yes.
Right. Well, because it's a drug, right? It's a naturally produced drug, which is unnaturally stimulated.
Well, there's like dopamine and I saw one set of cluster that was 4. It was dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and one other. And I was like, actually, that's an interesting set, because it was the pleasure, serotonin apparently that you get hits of when you get something that's been difficult and delayed response. Oxytocin is the one when you get puppy bonding, right, or nursing or something, right? Yeah. Sort of strong feel, and maybe it was testosterone. I can't remember. No, it wasn't. What the other one? It doesn't matter because there are more hormones in that. What's astonishing about most of modern, both psychology and, definitely modern psychology, and we don't even have a spiritual sort of structure that most people are able to think in, is how, like, comically go back to the Disney girls, right? It's stripped down to the level of kids' cartoon desires.
Yeah.
Instead of recognizing how these different thoughts work on us, and Gregory goes on to imagine what they're like. But the leaders are well said to exhort the armies to howl, because the first vices force themselves into the deluded mind, as if under a kind of reason. But the countless vices which follow, while they hurry it on to every kind of madness, confound it, as it were, by bestial clamor. For vainglory is wont to exhort the conquered heart, as if with reason, when it says. And this is the antiquity and the Middle Ages were much more complex in their understanding of the interaction between reason and desire, and they understand us to be rational, but reason is folded into all of these other elements of our soul. For vainglory, but vainglory says, thou ought to aim at greater things, that as thou hast been able to surpass many in power, thou may be able to benefit many also. So the temptation there is like Gandalf's temptation. It's like you're going to be powerful and be able to work your will if you go ahead. Envy is also most wont to exhort the conquered heart, as if with reason, when it says, in what art thou inferior to this or that person? Why then art thou not either equal or superior to them? What great things art thou able to do, which they are not able to do? They ought not then to be either superior or even equal to thyself.
It pains me to hear that description, because you get to a certain age, you've met people like this, and it's always kind of sad because they're never going to get it, and they don't even understand that they don't need that to be happy, and in fact, it's making them very unhappy. It's kind of hard to hear that description.
Saying, well, I mean, but this is saying you're able to do great things, and right. They're not able,
and why, right? And why haven't you done it yet, right? So it's kind of like these people that are afflicted by vainglory. It's an affliction. It's a spiritual affliction.
These are afflictions.
They can't. Yeah, they can never be happy. It's very sad for them. It's like the glutton who can't stop eating, and they can't move because they've gotten so huge. They're not happy. Right. They're doing things that they keep doing the same thing, thinking they're going to be happy. But the vainglory one is harder to overcome, I think, than the gluttony, because the vainglory it hits all of your desires. Right.
Right.
I should have a more handsome husband. He should make more money. I should have my own business. I should have all the business. Why is this business still running? Right.
Right.
It can go in so many different directions. Gluttony's just eating. Okay. You could probably get over that easier, but I mean, and I understand there's psychological stuff going on in there, but the vainglory just,
well, that was envy that I was just reading there. Yes.
Tough.
Vainglory, envy.
Yeah.
Then anger. He says all of these are wont to exhort the conquered heart, as if with reason. These vices are all, the sins are all reasoning with you. Right? These are rational arguments that you're going to talk yourself into, thinking that these are right. This is anger. The things that are done to thee cannot be borne patiently. Nay, rather patiently to endure them is a sin, because if thou dost not withstand them with great indignation, they are afterwards heaped upon thee without measure. So, it's like it's appropriate that you get angry. Or a melancholy says, what ground hast thou to rejoice when thou endurest so many wrongs from thy neighbors? Consider with what sorrow all must be looked upon who are turned in such gall of bitterness against thee. Avarice sounds just like the Santa Claus. It is a very blameless thing that thou desires some things to possess, because thou seekest not to be increased, but art afraid of being in want, and that which another retains for no good, thou thyself expendest to better purpose. Gluttony tries to convince you that all things are clean, and therefore, you're refusing God's gifts. Lust. Why enlargest thou not thyself now in thy pleasure, when thou knowest not what may follow? Thou ought not to lose in longing the time thou hast received, because thou knowest not how speedily it may pass by. For if God had not wished man to be united in the pleasure of coition, he would not, at the first beginning of the human race, have made them male and female.
Yeah, God's lying to you. Yeah, you won't die.
Yes, all of that. And
yeah, you'll be just like him, and he doesn't want you to be that way. He's keeping something from you.
But this thing, it's like you should want to, you should want to have lust, because after all, he made us male and female.
Yeah, right. Well, can you even say that this month? Yeah, that doesn't matter, bigot.
Well, I mean, we have. Hopefully, what we've started people.
That made us birthing persons and not birthing persons.
Started you all thinking about is maybe we need some more sophisticated psychology to deal with. In fact, I mean, like this cloud of temptations that are brought against us. So then you can say, well, okay, what's Christ? What is it to be Christian against these kinds of temptations?
I think people see self-denial as the answer to that, and they're repelled by that idea because they don't see how they benefit from it in this life. And what good answer do you have for those sides? Might not. This life isn't set up to give Christians everything they desire. It's not traditional thinking about what it means to be a Christian. It isn't about getting stuff in this life. It isn't about satiating desire.
Well, okay, so that's true. In this, that we're coming out of this monastic ascetic ideal, which is a lot of, I mean, so, and again, I'm trying to disentangle a lot of these things. So we're saying we're going to need to read through the Sermon on the Mount to understand what Jesus teaches in that situation. It's not exactly this sort of interior complexity of the soul, which is I find interesting. If you simply read the scriptures straight, it can feel like there's no inside of the soul, and certainly not at the level that the monastic authors like Gregory got to with their commentaries.
Not sure what you mean by that. No inside of the soul? What does that mean?
I think it's what people expect when they say they want to read the Bible and they sit down and they think they're going to read it through like a novel, and they don't find the characters in their self-examination in the way that they expect to have in a novel.
Okay. Are people doing self-examination when they read a novel? If you read it with that purpose, maybe.
I've just stepped off a cliff that I wasn't anticipating. I do know what I'm talking about, but I need to say it out loud. Yeah. So part of the problem is I am so steeped in these monastic commentaries that I know what you're saying. It's like, of course, it's all in the Song of Songs. It's all in the Psalms. How can you say that your soul isn't there in the interior? The problem is, for a lot of modern readers, they don't find, I mean, it's like if you're a teenager and you're reading the Bible and you want to know how to deal with that feeling that you have about that boy that you like, it's not in there, right? Maybe in the Song of Songs, but
right,
it's or the kinds of self-identities that people are looking for. Sorry, I've this entire exercise tonight is dropping off these cliffs.
I think I understand what you're saying. You're thinking people are gonna, who've never read it before, maybe never heard it before, are gonna crack open the Bible and expect to be enlightened in the middle of it and go and have their light bulb moment and go off. That they get it, that they get faith now. Faith doesn't come from reading, though.
I know that. Yes, I know that, and no, that's something true, but not what I was thinking.
I'm not going to keep guessing.
No, the thing is, no, it's not. None of what you've said is wrong. It's.
No, I mean, I guess wrong what you're thinking.
Right, but what I think what I'm trying to do is articulate for myself, live streaming, something that I've intuited but never properly described. And what I'm thinking right now is, okay, so I did this course on the virtues and vices, which is one level of looking at the tradition, but it was all completely within this monastic. There's these 7 deadly sins, and there's corresponding virtues, but the sins are like the primary category, and then the virtues have battles against the vices, and it's all very interior, right? It's like this entire battle is taking place. It's more like, I just saw a ad for that movie. There's the cartoons where the different parts of your psyche or
Inside Out.
Yeah. Right. Most medieval spiritual instruction at this level is kind of like that, right? It's like you're dealing with those little monsters inside of you.
Oh, okay.
Right? That have different, but all the inside out though, they're all like if you express them all, they're all healthy in certain ways, right? Which is a different sort of model. But
Right.
but
they all work together, right? Well, no, I mean the commentaries that were written had to be very helpful for the people who were living those lives and not understanding why they, according to themselves, I can imagine, kept failing, right? Kept
well, it's
failing
just
to grow
hard to
in
live.
virtue.
It's hard to live in that sort of purity of spiritual self discipline. Just
right, self-discipline and self-denial, because self-denial is probably not it's not innate, right? It's not something,
right. Can you be
it's not
trained
something
in
you're
it?
born with, right? And it's a constant retraining.
And they're constantly using the scriptures as their anchor for things that they're thinking about, but it riffs off into, I mean, the verse that Gregory's even talking about at this point is, what is he talking about? Raging and snorting, he swalloweth the earth, neither believeth he that the blast of the trumpet soundeth. When he heareth the trumpet, he says, Vi, smelleth the battle far off. I think he's talking about the Leviathan.
Revelation?
No, he's in Job. Smelleth the battle far off. Where is he? Over the... It's not apparent that what he's talking about. Will thou give the horse strength, or wilt thou surround his neck with neighing? I'm not even sure what chapter he's in. It's ridiculous.
I'm gonna have to read Job again.
It doesn't. Well, the thing is, it doesn't matter because they're in this deep allegory of the psyche, so far deep down that most readers don't even know how to get there. This is an old translation. There isn't even been a new translation of Gregory in this one came out in. So when did this one? I don't know. It's like 19th century, 18th, early 20th century.
I found Job very, very hard to follow when I read it on my own several times, trying to understand it.
Well, and Gregory doing this is making it even harder, right? Because it's like he's riffing riffing off of all of these layers of understanding of the soul that for him may or may, it's like he's just it's organized, but not in a way that it's like a stream of consciousness organization that's different from what Thomas Aquinas would do, for sure, right? But so I was thinking about in the course that I did on the virtues and vices, we were all within this kind of system, right? And we read things like Bernard of Clairvaux on the steps of humility and pride, and we read Thomas Aquinas on his categories of the virtues. We read Dionysius the Carthusians on. It's like, but it was all within this monastic tradition. I did another course that was on how to be good, and that was actually like we started with Confucius, and then we read Plato, and we read Aristotle, and we read Numbers from the Old Testament, and then we read like the Sermon on the Mount, and what else we read in the New Testament? We read some the Talmud, and we read Aquinas, right? And that set of readings was very specifically designed to show they're all different, right? It's like for Confucius, what the worry is how to be a human being, but it's in this very social context. For Plato, there's questions of justice and virtue. For Aristotle, it's a contemplative ideal, but only for the leisured and this slave society, right? That the citizen have a particular kind of ability, blah 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 blah, right? And I think what's interesting about all of this is that usually when we're talking about what Christian morality is, we're not at all clear about what level are we describing.
Levels of morality,
or is it the interior of the psyche? Is it your behavior with your neighbor? Is it a social structure that you're working within? Is it how do we behave politically, right? And
well, those are probably all related, right? How you would act socially and politically, and how you act towards your neighbor.
Those are all related, yes.
Right. People don't normally compartmentalize them like that. It gets, use the word again, It gets brought down to just being nice, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And yet nobody finds that a satisfying description of what it means to behave in all of the complex situations that human beings find themselves in.
Yeah. Right. Especially in a society such as ours.
Or any society. This is Gregory the Great writing in the 6th century, and it's way more complicated than most people are able to articulate now.
Yeah.
And I've read 2 pages.
It's 2 more pages than I've read.
Well, no, I mean, I read 2 pages right now. And
see, ever for me.
Gregory's book is one of the most widely read monastic treatises throughout the Middle Ages, right? So we're talking about what are the Dark Ages, right? It's like, stupid questions about the Middle Ages. Like, people were really unsophisticated. It's like, are you kidding me? The
reason people say people like him are unsophisticated is because they can't understand him, and it's their pride that stops them from admitting it and just trying to do the hard work of trying to understand it by reading it 2, 3, and 4 times.
Good thing I've done it. Okay, so having worked through, let's see, wanting to understand what this monastic system of training the soul was like. And this actually gets to, maybe we'll scrabble our way out of the morass of confusion.
It does seem like a morass.
It's a military metaphor. We notice that we've been talking about all these military metaphors, right? And this is what Gregory says this, right? But the soldier of God, since he endeavors skillfully to pursue the contest with vices, smells the battle far off. Because while he considers with anxious thought what power the leading evils possess to persuade the mind, he detects by the sagacity of his scent the exhortation of the leaders. Because he beholds the confusion of subsequent iniquities by foreseeing them afar off, he finds out, as it were, by his scent, the howling of the army. Okay, he's been talking about the horse all along, so now he's going to do a bird. Okay, so this has all been under the horse. Monks actually spend most of their lives trying to train themselves in this sort of spiritual discipline, and they do it with the understanding that the life of man is a warfare, which is in the ad that I put for this episode. That's what I use that quote. It's Job 7:1, right? The life of man on earth is a warfare. What does that mean, right? What kind of warfare is it? For the monks, they recognize it's this, in fact, warfare with the self, right? Going back to pride is self-worship. This is recognizing that you, in your soul, are going to be constantly attacked by these swarms of, pride and her sub-vices and all of their sub-vices, and that what you are in this life is constantly assailed by all of those, chittering thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Which would be highlighted even more so if you were out in the middle of the desert trying really hard not to think of anything else but God.
Well, ironically, that's why those guys went out into the desert, because they figured that's where they'd be attacked worst.
Oh, they were testing themselves.
Oh, yeah. It's battle training.
They wanted to go into battle.
Right? So
the church militant, baby.
But this is you're like the front line. This devil front line is your soul, and you're going to go out into the desert and fight these demons, right? And they're both, for Evagrius, they're both sins that are thoughts, they're inside you, and they're actual demons outside of you, right? So it's psychologically quite sophisticated.
So this is how you reach the wider world. Dean Koontz, right? Odd Thomas, who wrote a whole series about it. One of them was made into a movie. At the very end of this movie, this very gifted, I don't know if he thinks it's a gift or a curse, the main character can see demons. And at the very last scene of this movie, he walks off into the desert towards Las Vegas to fight them, to find them. He wants to destroy them. And it was a really cool ending. I loved it.
That is neat.
Yeah, but
the thing, but in the monastic understanding, they're both inside.
Dean Koontz is a Catholic. I think he might have gotten the idea from that.
Very likely.
Right. So,
right.
Yeah, he's a convert, which probably means he's read quite a lot. Unlike the rest of us who are born Catholics, right? He was a convert, so he's probably read a lot. So yeah, his main character walks off into the desert to fight the demons.
But it's like I mean, it's literally spiritual exercises, right? It's that you are,
right.
and this is in the monastic tradition. This is what they're typically. It's like what Ignatius Loyola ends up calling them, the spiritual exercises. It's all, strength training. Talk about virtue, right? This is strength training for your soul.
Yes. Yeah, not for the faint of heart.
Well, very much.
It is
very much.
It is for a warrior.
So my understanding that all of this had this military element to it, I decided I was going to learn defense. because what's interesting about the monastic life is it's embodied, right? It's incarnate. And in the monastic understanding, we have the chance in this life now to train like this, right? We're going to do battle, under Christ the King, while we have time, while we are in this life, in this Gregorian understanding of while we are alive, we have the chance to do this kind of battle. It's like, never mind the manosphere stuff that, you want to go lift weights and stuff. You got to do this too, right? It's like you're lifting, but you're lifting within the spiritual training. And that in fact, in learning to fence, thus my blog, Fencing Bear at Prayer, right? In learning to fence, I was forced to, interestingly, confront directly all of these things that Gregory's describing. There was a T-shirt, right, that said the 7 deadly fencing sins. so that you start recognizing these are weaknesses of the soul when you are being, it's like you're being tempted to all of these failings that should be kind of embarrassing, probably, right? And
what should be embarrassing?
They're all embarrassing. And I have described, we should probably put this in the link, right? That how I finally understood the best way to describe in modern terms what all of these 7 deadly sins are, and to say there are ways in which you can counter them and train yourself against them. And pride is this one. So pride, this is the vice of grandiosity with its companion depression. It feeds on the intolerance of strong negative feelings and is rooted in a weakened sense of self brought on by the denial of said feelings, often going back to childhood. It wants at all costs not to feel worthless, but its sense of worth is dependent upon being the best and therefore constantly at risk. I realize I'm kind of describing narcissism here, but I didn't really know that. In particular, it masks feelings of shame and gives power to other people's opinions and judgments, especially over one's feelings. It is triggered by excessive attention to self, seen as constantly threatened with judgment, and the corollary need to feel oneself in control, be like gods. This is me, right? This is my trend. It gives some modern articulation to the kinds of things that I see the monastic tradition describing, and in our analog version of things, so that you're saying, pride is this constant, you're having to constantly puff yourself up because you're desperately being attacked by these feelings of worthlessness and the sense that you should be able to be in control of everything all the time.
Yeah.
And that the antidote for these things is to watch for these as temptations, right? So that you're watching yourself and understand that if you are tempted by that depression and grandiosity antidote, watch for the temptation to believe that you are or can or should be in control, that you could save yourself if only you do or say exactly the right thing. Also watch for the temptation to believe that you can find in yourself and others' response to you, and or that their response can somehow supply the validation or absolution that you crave. Okay, well, that does sound like it's narcissism.
It does sound like narcissism, and it's an extreme form of self-reliance, which is also hard for people to see as a sin here. And where we're encouraged to be self-reliant, Americans in particular. I don't know what anybody else is like, but I don't know. That's one of the secular virtues you're raised with, is to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Right?
Yeah.
And just work really hard and try to get everything you think you want or need. And if you haven't got it, it's because you haven't worked hard enough. Right.
Well, so this is what I was trying to describe in all of these, and which is why I sort of started the episode tonight with feeling, grumpy and stuff. It's like, these are the sorts of things that make you lash out at other people and blame them for your bad feelings.
Yeah. Because you don't want to feel bad.
You're feeling bad. And that's, it seems to me, is like what Gregory's describing is like, you're assailed by all these these arguments, right? That what he's describing is as the sins are tempting you to. And the more you get attacked by all of those bad feelings, I mean, I'd say this is the kind of thing that we see in the protests and the pride and all of this. It's this fury that other people aren't able to fix you or do what you want, or that's sometimes you said that the protesting stuff is like it's toddlers having tantrums and saying, if I'm gonna hold my breath until I turn blue and you're gonna give me what I want.
That is it. Yeah. Which is a common trait amongst a lot of different political causes where people go out and protest. It was the Me Too protests tended to be like that because they got really vulgar, and the pride marches are certainly like that. It's very much look at me, how you have to look at me. I don't exist if you don't see me in all my glory.
Yeah.
And yeah.
But it's
or the climate protests where people are like blocking traffic, and it's
right.
They all have the same flavor. They all have the same, I'm not budging. I'm going to sit here and do my protest, literally sit on the ground and I'm not moving. Right. And you can't go by me, or else I'll accuse you of attacking me. So you've got people physically blocking you and then threatening to falsely accuse you of attacking them if you try to go around them. It's just it's pretty typical of what I've seen over the past 10 years of all of these. And so, it is kind of a certain spirit.
There's a spirit. Literal. Yeah, there's a spirit to it. What I'm thinking is, okay, so I've ended up with, we intended this episode to be one that sort of opens up some bigger problems. And I feel like we just opened up the entire life.
It's a cluster bomb.
Total cluster bomb of, the 7 deadly sins problem is one about training your soul to be strong against this sort of mental attack, right?
Yeah. And
the mental attack was, as in the monastic ascetic tradition, was expected, right? It's like something that when you come out of it, it is a military training, right? It's like if you come out of this, you are able maybe I've finally hit clarity, right? You're able to deal with all the stuff that, comes at you. So that, for example, and this I've said a lot, and the more I did the fencing training and was able to deal with these emotions that I got in the midst of, losing fencing bouts constantly. So envy was my big one, right?
Envy is a tough
envy
one.
Was we can do a whole episode on envy. Insofar, it's like if I'm spending all of my time being envious of the other fencers whom I think I ought to be able to beat, and they're getting to be on the medal podium, and I'm not. I'm a nasty person to be around. And that sort of failure of, I'm trying to say, whether it's failure of sociability, whether it's failure of manners, it's not it's not really failure of niceness, because you're so far beyond that by this point. It's this and whether it's a failure of, I don't think it's like Aristotelian virtue level stuff, right? Because he's all about staying balanced all the time. Aristotelian virtue stuff is all, you're not going to go to one extreme or the other, and it's all going to be nicely moderate. This monastic, the monastic tradition is really like what it's like to be in the thick of the battle. Keep going back to that battle. You have to understand what it's like to be in this thick of this battle. And it's an accurate,
they're not just in the middle of the road.
It's an accurate description of what being assailed by stuff, all of these, it's like, what are they? Thoughts, demons, temptations, trials. Why is it so hard to just be happy, right? Or something like that. It's not really that. Why is Job attacked?
Envy. Job is attacked because of envy, right? And I think Satan was envious of Job, and said to God, he only loves you because you give him lots of stuff. Mm-hmm. Take his stuff away, he'll stop loving you.
Right.
So
there's some level potentially of stoicism in here, but there's something else too. And what I would think is, like, what is Christ in all of this, right? What is Christ for us in this understanding of our spiritual reality?
The antidote. The antidote for the afflictions.
That's it. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting when we say Christ saves us from what? Fundamentally, at this level, in this monastic tradition, it saves us from these thoughts, these deadly thoughts that
these debilitating
send us
thoughts.
into despair, send us into self-harm, mm-hmm. send us into rage at our neighbors, send us into, what are the other ones?
Yeah.
Envy. Anger,
lust, right? Avarice.
Right. These are, I'm reading through these now. I wrote this like 10 years ago, 12 years ago. It's interesting how my sense of, we can talk about sloth. It's sloth that I can do, because that's writer's block.
So what's the difference between anger and wrath? That's another good question, because a lot of these seem very similar.
Sometimes it's just a different word, and sometimes it's actually different character of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right. Okay, I understand that. Yeah, different degree of it.
Right.
Just righteous anger, just plain anger, and then there's wrath, which. Yeah.
Well, so it's interesting that we have so many words for all of these different,
isn't it?
Experiences, emotions, responses, and they're not. Mm-hmm. It's like some of them are spiritual, as Gregory says. Some are spiritual and some are carnal, but that they overlap, and that we are clearly, responding to them in our incarnate self, but that they have effects on us that seem to be other than just physical. And
I think the effects are mostly spiritual and mental.
Yes. Well, I mean, even for something like gluttony, right? Because it's the gluttony. And this one this is the vice of using food to suppress uncomfortable feelings and of relying on food as a substitute for feeling loved. It typically manifests as overeating, above all, depending on carbohydrates for comfort. I understand all this better now. I do my sugar stuff since then. But it also hides in efforts to control one's eating through restrictive dieting, or worse. Above all, it masks feelings of impatience and perfectionism by making food the problem and the threat. Again, like pride, it is most often triggered by feelings of worthlessness. That's its shadow side of believing that the answer is control. Antidote, feel the feelings.
Right. People, anorexics want extreme control over their body. They all say the same thing. I wanted control. It gave me a sense of control, and my life felt out of control. This is something I could control, and I could see it. It was tangible. Right. Yeah. So the opposite of extreme overeating is extreme undereating, but it's the same. It's the same goal, right? It's to have some kind of control over your feelings.
Right. And that most of them, I mean, the sense of being assailed by things, things we can't control, and therefore wanting to fix them by that. Most of these vices do turn back into control. Lust is greed is hoarding, right? And the way Evagrius and Gregory both say it, it's like fear of not having enough later, right?
Yeah.
It promises, with the help of advertisers the world over, that having this or that thing will make one's life fulfilling and meaningful. and or give power over one others. All of these things constantly. And I've had hovering in the back of my head all the time we've been talking about this, a reading of The Lord of the Rings. And someone was talking about this morning in the chat and asking whether or not the ring was this, that, or the other. The ring is always about control. Right? That's the one thing Sauron wants to be able. He wants to control other people's wills. But the ring used against ourselves in this interesting way is trying not to deal with our own well, and then you get with like, what is Christ? He's our antidote to all of this. And in fact, the one without whom it's impossible to win this battle.
Right.
Which leaves
he didn't just conquer death.
Which leaves us in a rather interesting situation from what is Pride Month about then anyway?
Yes. What is Pride Month? What are you supposed to be? Yeah.
Like, what is it? It's like, because it was a social movement to say, you know, we want to not exclude people. So it seems like it's a social situation. But then the activities being engaged in, I think we're clearly going to have to keep going on this, right? But it's very interesting that Pride,
a whole month.
or more, right? I did the blog for years and years and years working through all of this.
Is there any end to Pride Month?
Oh.
Really?
Well, it's clearly a like a synecdoche for all of this, because pride is it's the queen of all these sins, right? She leads all of them. The queen of sins.
Yes.
And all of these vices follow on, and yet it's been tangled up in all of these things about pleasure and it somehow ironically
self-indulgence.
Well, so we say the hermits living by themselves have more of an appreciation about the effects that they can have on others than we do now, when we're always saying we're supposed to be able to satisfy ourself with whatever we can consume.
And why is that? Why did they have a better grasp of it?
Well, I think they took the problem seriously.
Yeah, they contemplated about it a lot, but they were also maybe it sounds like they were subjected to a lot of that temptation in their minds constantly.
Well, the irony of it being, it's like, yes, that they set themselves up to have to confront it directly. They didn't anesthetize themselves against the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of sin is, that's a good word for it. It's anesthetizing, right? Whether it's alcohol or drugs or sex, or food.
Yes.
Right. Just indulgence, or just things. Some people are addicted to shopping, just buying things they don't need constantly. I've met people like that too. You know, these are not happy people. They're trying to fill a hole with stuff that's never going to get filled. And that's the lie of the 7 deadly sins. Since if you indulge yourself in any one of these things, then you'll be happy, but you never are. Right.
That's exactly what Gregory says, because with reason it says, and each of them did that, right? With reason it says, indulge me and.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was way harder than I thought it was going to be.
It was really hard.
I feel like we won. I think we demonstrated the difficulty of the question.
Yeah.
I don't know.
How do you get people to see it's wrong? That's the difficulty. It's like,
yeah,
really, how do you do it? How do you do it as a Christian in a non-Christian world to a person who's either rejected Christianity or perverted it? And there's plenty of that going around in everybody's Christian church these days. Unfortunately, it's a sickness. And it's only one antidote. You have to remember who they are and who they serve.
Yeah, but I think we have a lot more work to do well, I think usually when you work through these sorts of things, you come out with, oh, the answer was always there, like Dorothy and her red slippers, and you just have to like see it, but you couldn't see it until you worked through it.
Magic of Hollywood.
And his whatever he was, Baum was not a theosophist or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, really? Was he?
I can't remember. Something like that. Who knows? Everybody's always. So, I mean, the short answer is everybody's always looking for a shortcut. So, and the monastic tradition says there's no shortcut. It's our life, and we're in training for the whole of it.
Right. They point towards the desert and say, the demons are there. Follow me.
Basically, yes.
We're going in.
And I think, so it's like, I think the real challenge, I've met people, I know people like, in fact, one of the men who was in the class that I taught on the virtues and vices, who was the Dominican at that point already. Right. And people who have been through this training are different. It's just like soldiers who have been through the training, or there's a calmness and a joy that there is no shortcut for. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's our goal. We just like I'll say I know how to get there. Learn to scan, right? that actually being in some kind of truly disciplined practice that's both aesthetic and virtuous and truthful gets you there.
Yeah.
And modernity is very, very impatient because the advertisers have taken over and said, well, you can just buy it, or you can just consume, and you will be transformed in this way that, in fact, nothing else can give you.
There's an example of that. So vocations to traditional orders that have a very hard aesthetic, where it's real hard work, right? To study, to live, and to pray, in a traditional way. That has a very large attraction for young people because they want to do something hard. They want to be challenged. And people who are looking for something like that, they do want to be challenged.
Well, excellent.
It's attractive on a certain level.
We're here to be continued. You gotta like and subscribe so you can keep with us, because this was just the beginning. And to say, if you want to come out of the fog of this month with clarity and purpose and a training plan, we're here for you.
The fog of the war on pride.
Well, okay, at least now maybe we've given some feel for how many layers we aren't addressing if we don't take this question seriously.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. I think we'll just stop now. To be continued. Okay. Very good. Thank you all for joining us. Stick with us. We're going to go there. We promise.